I was forced to stop lifting heavy weights because of a heart condition, and I was terrified that I was gonna lose my physique. But I made 4 big changes in my training that helped me lose more fat and build more muscle. And in today's video, I'm gonna share with you exactly what I did. So let's jump into it. Okay, the very first thing I did different, and this is the obvious one, but it's gonna set the stage for the whole video, is I used lighter weights, with more reps. So what I did before for 10 to 15 years of my training, I used to really hang out in that 5 to 8 rep range. So I'm talking like heavy weights, not a lot of reps, sometimes even like 1 RM deadlifts, 1 RM bench press, maybe 3 to 5 RM back squats, like just going heavy. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But in 2021, when I was diagnosed with my heart condition, my cardiologist told me, okay, you can't lift heavy weights anymore. You can still lift weights, but you gotta make sure how much you're stressing your heart. So basically what I gotta try to avoid is like those quick, sudden bursts of motion, you know, where you're kind of holding your breath or you're just kind of like bouncing off like the weight. So stuff like that, I'd be really careful about. So obviously the very first step I had to do, which is gonna really set the stage for everything else, is I just lowered the weight and I increased my reps to more of like a 10 to 15 rep range. And that's still what I'm doing to this day. And I think because I'm increasing the reps, it really helped me give 3 other big positive benefits, which I'm really gonna dive into right now. And I promise you, if you follow these 3 things, you're gonna see some fantastic results yourself. So let's get into it. Okay, the second thing I did differently, and this is almost like a 2-in-1, but I focus on a lot more control and I focus on more range of motion. So before when I was lifting heavy, like I don't really give a fuck about those things. It's more just like get the weights to point A to point B. I don't care how I get it there. Like in a squat, like I don't care if I'm master grass. If it's a deadlift, I don't care if it's like a touch and go. Like I'm not stopping the ground. If it's a bench press, like I'm bouncing that bad boy off my chest. So those are things I really just focused on when I was like lifting heavy. I just didn't care about it. But when I really had to go lighter and focus with like a lot more control, I just really took advantage of that. And I noticed my range of motion got better as well. It makes sense, right? Like if you're going like heavy weights, there's a good chance you're probably cheating a little bit, whether it's like a row and you don't go all the way, or it's a squat, like I said, maybe you're stuck halfway. You know what I'm talking about. There's always that one guy who like loads up the leg press and he does like quarter reps. So when you go a little bit lighter, you can just focus more on the control portion of the movement, which is very important. I'll get more in that in just a minute. And it just helps you more that range of motion as well. So if you're wondering, and let's say you just focus on heavy weights, try making that change, focus on more control, better range of motion. That's what I did. It helped me a lot, and I guarantee you'll see the same benefits as well. Okay, the third thing I did different was I focused more on time and retention, but time and retention in the hardest positions of the exercise. So what do I mean by that? Remember before I said I was just kind of like bouncing my squats and, you know, bouncing the bar with the chest press or doing touch and go deadlifts? Like in those tough positions, I was just using all momentum and I wasn't really stopping at all. But the change I made that made such a big difference for me is I hung out more in those tough positions, which causes obviously a lot more tension and a lot more torque to your muscles. So for example, in the bottom of the chest press in that mid-range, I'm sure you know it's the toughest, right? Like when you re-rack the bar on the bench, it's not that challenging. Like you guys can probably hold there for minutes without collapsing it. But in that bottom position, I mean, you can hold it there, but you're not gonna push it back up, right? That's where it gets tough. It's the same thing with a squat. Like when you get a bar in the squat and you unrack it, you can hold that there for a long time. Like even if you have some heavy ass weights, like, you know, you can still hold there for a while, but you're not gonna hold there for 5 minutes at the bottom position, right? Not even like 1 minute. So what I typically did, I'm not saying I held there for 5 minutes, don't get me wrong, but what I would do is, let's say in the bottom of a chest press, I was gonna hang out there for like 1 second, use no momentum, push it back up. Same thing with the squat. Go down, hold there for 1 second, push it back up. A row, hold there for 1 second, the end range, come back down. It's that simple. If you spend more time in the tough positions, and I should make a full video on this one day, it's something called torque. Like I don't want to get too much in the details right now, but if you spend more time in those tough positions, I guarantee you're gonna get better results because so many guys just miss out on the opportunity because we want to ego lift and we just want to kind of get the the weights from point A to point B. So make sure you spend time in those tough positions, and trust me on that, you'll thank me later. Now we're done 3 things I changed. I got 1 more for you. And then at the end, I'm gonna tell you if I could lift heavy weights, what would I still choose? And the answer might surprise you. You're not gonna miss that. So the 4th thing I did different was I focused a lot more on recovery, and it came down to 2 to 3 main things. So when I was lifting heavy, it's never ideal, right, to put a ton of stress on your body, right? Because I'm lunging 235 pounds. That's probably not good for the knees, lower back, the ankles, in the long run. I'm not gonna say it's bad. Like if you program it the right way, there's nothing wrong with lifting heavy weights. I'm not saying there is, but it does take a toll on his body eventually, right? So I knew that if I wanted to, get ripped, build more muscle, I had to dominate the recovery portion, even mostly outside of the gym. So before, when I was lifting heavy, and when I was a little bit younger, in my later 20s, maybe even 30, 31, is I didn't really care too much about sleep. Like, I'd drink till like 2 o'clock in the morning on weekends, wake up at 9 or 8. Didn't really care too much about sleep and recovery. It was more just like lift weights, get ripped. And, if I get a great result, fantastic. If not, I'm not that concerned about it. But when I started to make my shift for lighter weights, I knew I had to really put more emphasis on what I'm doing outside of the weight room, because I think so many times we forget that, and it's so important. So what I did differently especially is I focus more on sleep. So I make sure I get 8.5 hours. If I don't, I'm absolutely a miserable guy. I guess when you get over 30, maybe that starts to happen. I focus more on mobility, especially as well. So a lot more hip mobility work and just stuff like that, making sure I'm recovering properly. And another big thing I did as well, in my 20s, I used to do a lot of like HIIT training, like burpees, Tabata, all, sprints, stuff like that. I made this change, so the HIIT and all that stuff I used to do, to more just walking. I think you're officially old when you make that change from like HIIT to walking, but that's what I did. And I can tell you right now, at almost 35 years old, my body feels way better than what I did when I was like at 30 years old. So recovery is key. And if you just do the first 3 things I talked about and you don't focus on recovery, I don't think you're gonna make that big of a change. So make sure you focus on recovery, get your sleep in, get your mobility in, and even just make the change from HIIT training and high intensity cardio to walking. Your body will thank you, you recover better, and you're just gonna feel better overall. Okay, so now that I know light weights versus heavy weights, I experienced, light weights now for about 4 years and heavy weights now for about like 10 to 15 years. If I could still lift heavy weights, what would I pick? I'm gonna tell you next in the segment. All right, heavy versus lighter. But first off, guys, if you do want the exact plan that I did, just comment plan below and I'll literally just send it your way 100% free. But heavy versus lighter now, I'm gonna pick the winner. You're probably thinking like, Rich, you're definitely choosing lighter, so why are we debating this? But not so fast. There's pros and cons of both. I'm gonna break them down and I'll give you my winner in just 1 minute. So let's start with the heavy weights. Like, what are some pros of lifting heavy? Number one, it's obviously better for strength. Like, obviously if you're lifting, in a 5 to 8 rep scheme compared to 10 to 15 reps, you're lifting more weight equals more strength. I don't have to break it down, pretty self-explanatory. The second thing, this is more anecdotal, but I just find it more enjoyable. Like, I don't know about you, like, I prefer lifting heavy in a sense, because like, I don't like doing 12 reps of barbell back squats. It's just annoying. Like, fuck this. Like, this is my 5 to 6 reps, take the pain and move on to the next set. So that's very anecdotal, of course. But the third thing as well, and something to consider, is it could potentially be less time. Because think about it. If you're doing 5 to 6 reps every single time, compared to like 12 to 15 reps, that's like over half the time just cut down in terms of how much time you're doing on the sets. Now, I say it's a little bit debatable because sometimes when we lift heavy, of course, you're gonna need longer breaks, right? So it really depends like how long your breaks are. But typically speaking, if you go a little bit heavier and you're just not doing a ton of volume, your workouts are gonna be just a little bit shorter compared to living in that 10 to 15 rep range. Okay, the cons of lifting heavy. So kind of things I already talked about, so I'm not gonna get into too much detail, but not as much control, we went over that. Typically speaking, not as much range of motion in the movements. And I'm not saying this every single time, like I know some people who lift like crazy amounts of weight, like powerlifters for example, who still need that range of motion. But typically speaking, if you're in the gym and the weight's a little bit heavier than you can handle, sometimes we just try to cheat it because we're trying to get to point A to point B. So just kind of keep that in mind. Number 3, better chance of poor form. Again, if we're lifting heavy, we're probably compensating somewhere. That's not always a bad thing. Like sometimes it's actually good at the end of the set. But if your first rep looks like this and you're doing 12 reps, or let's say 8 reps, that's probably not a good thing, right? So there's just a better chance of poor form when you're lifting heavy. And the fourth thing is better chance of an acute injury. So, you're lifting heavy, you load up a deadlift, you pull it, next thing you know, your back's gone, right? So those things happen a little bit more frequently when you lift heavy. When you lift a little bit lighter for more reps, more of those chronic injuries happen, right? You get those more those tendons and those like lingering issues. But when you lift heavy, it's just a better chance of essentially blown out something in your lower back or whatever the case may be. Okay, so some pros now of lifting light. I'm not getting the cons because it's basically the exact opposite of the pros for lifting heavy. And then I'm gonna tell you if I had to pick one and my winner. So the very first thing, like I said, it's gonna be more control. Second thing, more range of motion. And third thing is the tension in the bottom part of the position. All the things I just talked about before. I'm not gonna get all the detail again because I don't wanna repeat myself. So if I had to pick one, lifting light versus lifting heavy, all the things I know, I talked about that I enjoy lifting heavy more. I got better results with lifting light. If I had to pick one, what would I choose? I'm gonna go lifting light by a very, very small margin. I'm not, so this should come as good news for you in a sense, because like if you enjoy lifting heavy in that 5 to 8 rep range, you can still get fantastic results for sure. But for me, I have seen a little bit better results lifting light. And I do think recovery plays a big factor in that, kind of, really factoring on my sleep and, mobility and walking and all the things I talked about. But if it came down to it, I'm gonna go down to picking light just because my body feels just way better at my age now. I feel like just, not as much like nervous fatigue, stress, and like I said, it's got a better result overall. So let me know below, like, what do you like doing? Do you prefer lifting heavy? Do you prefer lifting light? Comment below what you prefer, and let me know what, if you're gonna make a change after watching this video from lifting heavy to lifting light, or you're just gonna stay on course. Or maybe you're already lifting light, and you're already giving me a thumbs up and you're happy with the results. But thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate you hearing my story, and we'll talk soon in the next video.